Go.
Hello everyone, my name is Niko Peterson, and thank you for coming to my 2024 Senior TED Talk. Almost 2.5 years ago, I lost my best friend Gavin to an accidental overdose involving fentanyl poisoning when they thought they were doing what they thought was Percocet, and what turned out to be laced with we don't know how much fentanyl. That made me want to start looking into harm reduction, and that made me figure out my research question: what are the impacts of harm reduction practices around the world, and how might these practices be implemented in Durango? Now, this wasn't originally my question. It has been changed around multiple times through the process of my research, which was expected, and I landed at the hypothetical a hypothetical scenario where I was looking at how how harm reduction programs would look if they were implemented into Durango's community, and how Durango's community would need to react to that in order for it to be successful. So the action part of this project is kind of a two-part plus a lot of other things. Zoe and I are teaching a curriculum to the 10th grade surrounding drug education, where we'll be teaching them what drugs are, what they can do, and the ways that they can experiment with them in a safer manner. And we also performed a nest meeting for the entire school, or for everybody but the senior class last Wednesday, and gave handed out Narcan testers and answered questions from the community at Animus here. Now, you can see on this graph how there's kind of a steady line of overdoses up until about 2014, where we see this massive spike in synthetic opioids, including methadone, primarily fentanyl. Now, we see this rise from 2014 to 2015 is a 73% increase. So it was around 5,500 overdose up to around 9,600. That happened because China started sending more and more of the chemicals necessary to make the drugs to the cartel, and in turn the cartel started pushing more and more fentanyl through the country. Now, what is fentanyl? Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is 50 times more potent than morphine and 100 times more potent than 50 times more potent than heroin, 100 times more potent than morphine. Right here you can see a lethal dose of fentanyl on the tip of a pencil, and over here you can see a regular large seizure of fentanyl. Imagine how many people that can kill if it only takes this much. And that comes into our country every single day. This is coming into our country across our borders, and coming into our country through airports, tanker ships, personal, like at the borders, I guess, and many different ways. Now, what is harm reduction? Harm reduction is a term referring to a multitude of intentional practices to lessen someone's negative physical or social outcomes when involved in specific activities, legal or illegal. Now, harm reduction has many forms. It is a very blanket term, a couple of those being life jackets, fire extinguishers, and seatbelts. Now, there are many different forms of harm reduction, and some earlier attempts at harm reduction practices was DARE. Now, DARE was founded in 1983, aimed to be an officer-led in-class lesson where they would deter the use of drugs and promote abstinence instead of promoting education and safety. Now, I have a little DARE commercial to show you guys from way back when.
Still isn't clear about what doing drugs does? Okay, last time.
Right in, right? Yep.
This is your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
Yes, I have a lot of questions.
So, as you can see, that was obviously the most effective and practical way to get the information across. Just kidding, April Fools. It was not. It didn't prove very efficient. it hasn't made much progress in these past 40 years. Wow, it's been 40 years since a long time. And so that's one side of the spectrum for an approach to harm reduction. And Measure 10 is an example of another side of the spectrum. Measure 10 was a law passed in Oregon, the most liberal law ever passed in the country, basically decriminalizing all drugs. So possession and administration of these drugs has now been, you cannot get jail time anymore. You can only be cited and encouraged to go to treatment centers. Now, this is a little bit difficult to analyze because we haven't really been able to see the full effects because it only has been about 3 years, or now 4, I guess, since it was introduced. But they are seeing that introducing this has not been helping. It has actually increased the overdose rate, and they have seen more struggle in their community. And the police officers are saying that encouraging these users to go and get treatment isn't as effective as they had initially thought. Now, a couple more examples of harm reduction: sunscreen, seatbelts, speed limits, birth control, cigarette filters. It's really, harm reduction is really anything, just trying to make a more dangerous activity safer. And in my specific case, I'm looking to prioritize education in the harm reduction practices that we're doing and promote proactive versus reactive treatment. So I'm hoping that with what we're doing, we can start to be more proactive in our treatment instead of reactive, like DARE, for example. Now, another form of harm reduction that we can see starting to be implemented in different areas is syringe services programs, or SSPs. Now, SSPs lessen the risk of infection and the spread of HIV and disease, but they also serve as a community bonding experience or destigmatization tool. So professionals and medical professionals and people involved in harm reduction will usually go out. It's more of a pop-up style at this point, just because it's still very new to the conversation, and it's a drop-off or exchange sort of system where the addicts can either bring in their used syringes and exchange them for clean ones, or they can come in and drop off their dirty needles for safe toxic waste management. Another example would be fentanyl test strips. Now, fentanyl test strips are a tool for testing the drugs or the content of your drugs. These initially have been being received very well and have been proving to be pretty effective. I am not sure the exact rate of effective, or I guess, I don't know what word I'm looking for. They work, and it doesn't, you can test many drugs with these test strips, and the need for these is extreme, and the need for availability for these and the access for people to just have these whenever they need them is extremely vital for people in this day and age, because you never know if your drug could be laced or not. Now, probably the biggest factor that I'm focusing on is naloxone or Narcan or Cloxada. There's different brands, but the medical term is naloxone. Now, naloxone is a synthetic. I'm sorry. It is an anti-opiate antagonist drug. So when somebody is overdosing, you administer Narcan either through an IV, through their bloodstream, or through a needle, a syringe, or the nasal spray. And essentially what Narcan does is it goes into your brain, and the way that opioids are attached to the receptors in your frontal lobe, it goes in and essentially kicks them out of the place that they're in and moves and takes over, and then starts reversing the effects inside of the body. Now, we have a very strong need for more availability for this product, more widely spread. Now, we can get it in a few areas in our town locally: San Juan Basin Public Health, Axis Health, and La Plata County Medical Association. Now, there are a lot of different aspects when talking about change and trying to start having those conversations. And a major one would be societal stigma. Now you can see in this graph over here that it goes public stigma, discrimination, prejudice, fear, damage to self-esteem and hope, treatment avoidance, self-stigma, shame, self-doubt, here. So this, obviously, nobody wants to feel like they're being discriminated against or that they don't matter. Damage to self-esteem and hope, treatment avoidance, that essentially can push a certain person to feel like they don't matter or like they don't want to recover because they don't feel like they can or like anybody cares for them to. And that promotes a self-stigma just within themselves, thinking that they really aren't as good as they are. And then that leads to shame and self-doubt, and obviously feeling shame and self-doubt can make you not want to go into and make yourself feel better and get sober and clean, or leave treatment and relapse and go back onto drugs to suppress those negative feelings. So having those societal stigmas in place really messes with our ability to push that change and have rehumanize these people and give them back their own personality and their meaning and make them feel like they're not just this drug addict sitting on the street corner. They're a person with feelings and emotions. Now, the availability for treatment centers is a major factor for why we don't have, or why people are resistant to treatment. So this is a map of Colorado, and these are all of the treatment centers that we have in here. So these in Durango are very, not very professionalized. For lack of better words, they have less regulations. They're more, I guess, home-based instead of medically based, funded by the state. They're a lot more small and Durango-like. And then the closest professional, regulated, government-funded treatment centers are in Denver. Now that's a major problem for a lot of reasons, but the main one being leaving your community. Having a lack of community support is detrimental to a person's ability to recover if they don't feel like they have those people keeping them accountable and those people that they're doing it for. Now, we need to look at the effectiveness of treatment centers and how we can make them better and why they do and don't work. Now, for many reasons, they are very beneficial at detoxing people and getting them sober for at least the time being, but the regulations need to be changed in order to look at it from a more emotional and empathetic standpoint. Now, during my research, I conducted a couple interviews with some professionals around the city, and I spoke with Sierra Rowe, the harm reduction coordinator for the La Plata County Department of Health, and she's a recovering addict herself. And when we spoke, she said, whether that's family, friends, or significant others, you're removing yourself from that and going to a place where you're not used to and maybe don't have the support or the resources you have at home to try to do this. And we do have some recovery housing, but they're very grassroots, like mom and pop. And that's when I asked her about, how she felt about the treatment center availability we have here. And it's AI transcribed from a phone call, so the grammar is kind of bad, and I don't want to mess with her quote, but the message is still there, that they don't have that support and that we do have some things here, but we still have a long way to go. She also said that it's more than just medication versus medication for opioid use disorder, and it's going to Denver or going to Grand Junction, so you're leaving the support system that you have here in Durango. And she's just restating that having those support systems and having those people there that make you feel like you matter and like that you want to do that for them is extremely crucial in recovery. Now, what can we do to change? The main thing, number one thing that I will preach is education. We need to start having these uncomfortable conversations, and we need to start getting people to realize the reality of the situation and that people do drugs, and that's how it is. And we need to start, instead of telling them not to do them, we need to look at it as in an education standpoint in how to do them in a safer manner or how to do them with more care for yourself. We also need to start giving back users humanity and giving them their meaning back and making them feel more involved in the community. Another major factor in change would be allocating funds necessary to start building and start having these conversations and start funding these treatment centers and these counseling programs and whatnot for recovery. Now, this is the call to action part. This is where I ask all of you. So when you see another person on the street, it looks like they're having a rough time struggling, battling addiction, to not think, wow, that person looks high, that person looks effed up. To think, wow, that person is struggling, that person has no control of themselves, that person cannot beat themselves, or cannot get themselves out of that loop. Now, I myself have been already advocating for this change and have been a part of authoring a bill that was passed through the Senate floor last week and is an opiate antagonist and detection policy for schools. So this is just one of the things that we have been doing these past 2 years and during this activity. And I just ask all of you, I urge you to go out with an open mind and search for education and search for the right information and just be driven for care. I don't know, just care about people. Don't judge. There's no reason. These people are not, they're not doing it to themselves. They're addicts. It's a disease, not a choice. Thank you very much.